The New York Yankees are having a very Mets-like week. I want to break that down on today's show and also talk about how Luis Severino might just be a better starting pitcher than anyone they'll have in their starting rotation. We got a lot to discuss on today's edition of Locked On Mets.
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans. You're watching Locked On Mets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein. If you want to find any of my work, follow me on X at Finkelstein Ryan. You can also find some of my writing at justbaseball.com, where I work as the managing editor. Everything that can go wrong will go wrong. That is a phrase that has been used about the New York Mets for years. A lot of times that's thrown out there from Yankees fans. So here we are on a Mets podcast talking about the Yankees with that same phrase in mind. This spring training, everything that can go wrong has gone wrong because the Yankees are in a bad place right now. I'm not typically one to be commenting on other teams and spending a whole show on it, and we're not. We're going to spend a segment here, but it's pretty crazy how Mets like this offseason, particularly this spring training, has been for the Yankees. So first off, they are the big winners of the offseason. They trade for Juan Soto. But in doing so, they created a very high-risk, high-reward team. On one aspect, Aaron Judge and Juan Soto in the same lineup is remarkable. Those two guys can lead the Yankees to a World Series this year. But they have 1 year of Juan Soto. And to acquire him, they gutted their pitching depth. They traded Michael King, who last year showed he could be a viable starting pitcher, maybe a really good one, at a 2.75 ERA and 104 and 2/3 innings pitch. They traded Johnny Brito and Randy Vasquez, two guys who, from a Mets perspective, for those of you who aren't aware of who Brito and Vasquez are, think of your Tyler McGill, David Peterson types, guys that are depth arms. Brito last year at a 4.28 ERA and a little over 90 innings pitched. Vasquez a 2.87 ERA in 37 and 2/3 innings pitched, had a 4.59 ERA and 17 AAA starts. But the bottom line is, that was two guys that were rookies last year in Brito and Vasquez that came with 6 years of control. Michael King, 2 years of control. And the kicker was they had to trade their top pitching prospect, Drew Thorpe, in that deal, a guy that could be big league ready this season. But it was all for a purpose. They were trying to win it all right now, give Aaron Judge and Gerrit Cole their best chance to win a World Series. Here's where it gets Mets-like. When you have a team that doesn't have a lot of pitching depth, there's always that concern when you go into camp. And the one guy they can't lose, Gerrit Cole. And the way this has transpired since Gerrit Cole has, had an elbow injury, has been so Mets-like that it's hard not to see the parallels. And there's been the gift that has gone out a bunch if you're on, Twitter or X, where it's James Franco. He's got the noose around his neck, and there's the other guy that looks, appalled up at him. And James Franco's, quote says, "First time." That's the Mets fans in this situation. We have seen what they're going through with Cole a million times, and particularly with Jacob deGrom. Oh, he's hurt. And then there's complete silence. And now they got the Andy Martino report today that the Yankees are cautiously optimistic, which is a death note because the Yankees were, and probably the Mets at some point, I think the Yankees were cautiously optimistic that they were going to sign Yoshinobu Yamamoto. The Mets were cautiously optimistic that Zach Wheeler was going to be fine when he eventually needed Tommy John. So I wouldn't be too excited about that if I was a Yankees fan. Bottom line, when it comes to Cole, there is no tear in his UCL right now. The first MRIs have come back relatively clean, yet with that said, they're sending him in to get looked at, and they're sending him to Dr. Neil Elatrash, who is the top surgeon right now, to get a second opinion on that elbow. The current prognosis is maybe a month or two being sidelined as he has to rest, maybe get an injection in his elbow. Who knows? But the fact that he's getting a second opinion, it is a really interesting situation with Cole where they're going to miss him for at least the beginning of the season. And you never really know when it's an elbow. And so the Yankees are already in a bad way when it comes to missing Cole. Now their rotation is Marcus Stroman, Carlos Rodon, who hasn't looked great this spring after a really bad first season in pinstripes, Nestor Cortez, Clark Schmidt, and Clayton Beeter, I guess, maybe Luke Weaver. So that's what they're dealing with. And all of a sudden they're circulating in the news. Hey, maybe they'll trade for Dylan Cease. They're interested. Well, now the Padres traded for Dylan Cease. And this is where the story gets good. Who was the headlining piece in the deal? None other than former Yankees farmhand Drew Thorpe, the guy that was the headlining prospect in the trade for Juan Soto, now gets turned around for Dylan Cease. So it's a genius move by AJ Preller if he wants to win this year, of course. Trying to be aggressive as always. He turns Soto into Thorpe, and then Thorpe, along with a couple other prospects, it's not like it was just Thorpe, into Cease. So now his starting rotation is Yu Darvish, Joe Musgrove, Dylan Cease, although Dylan Cease might just be the ace on this team with how good his stuff is, and then Michael King with the depth guys the Yankees sent, helping fill out the back end of that rotation and give him some coverage on injuries throughout the year. The Padres look like a contender again. And now the Yankees are short on depth and Cease is off the board. So if they want to add to their team, they're going to have to spend a premium just like the Mets have had to try to fill out their rotation the last couple of years. They're over the Steve Cohen tax. I mean, it is just crazy how Mets-like the Yankees are right now. Maybe they do it. Maybe they sign Blake Snell or Jordan Montgomery, and maybe they are fine this year. Hopefully Gerrit Cole does get back because you don't want to see the best pitcher in baseball on the shelf for 2 years. So hopefully he is able to get back into the rotation for the Yankees. But it has just been a crazy turn of events for this Yankees team the last couple of weeks. And for once, Mets fans, not that you want to laugh at Yankees fans because of it, but for all the times that a Yankees fan has looked down on you and has pointed fingers and laughed at, oh my God, I can't believe, oh, if only Jacob deGrom was healthy, and oh, they spent that much money for that team. Well, without Gerrit Cole, even if it's for 2 months, if they don't address that, you look at the AL East right now, I think they're pretty clearly the third best team, if not the fourth best team. And I'm saying the Orioles are number one, and the Rays, just based on always being Rays, are maybe number two. And then the Blue Jays are right there. The Blue Jays got a really good rotation. All of a sudden, this Yankees team, even with Aaron Judge and Juan Soto, though Judge is also dealing with, some nagging injuries already. It's a tough row to hoe there for your Yankees. And not that we're going to talk Juan Soto to the Mets, but 1 year of Soto with the Yankees and what type of year is it going to be? So interesting stuff, to say the least, that's going on in Major League Baseball. The funny thing about all of it, is there a chance that Luis Severino puts together a better season in a Mets uniform than any Yankees starting pitcher this year? He had another great outing in spring training on Wednesday. I want to talk about that and some other interesting performances in that game, as well as just notes when it comes to the Mets starting rotation. Okodai Senga injury update. The opening day starter has been announced. We'll go through all those pitching updates in just a minute. First, though, today's episode is brought to you by Amazon Fire TV. Fire TV offers amazing viewing experiences with smart TVs, as well as the Fire TV stick that you can plug into your existing TV that provides access to millions of movies and TV episodes, as well as free and live TV. I know personally, I love the Fire TV stick because I can unplug it from my living room TV. And if I go on the road, I can put it right into the hotel room TV and I can see all of my favorite shows. All my sign-ins are there. It just makes things so much easier. And Fire TV recently created Fire TV channels. Deliver a constant supply of the latest videos from your favorite sports brands, all for free. And that includes all of us at Locked On and most of the big pro leagues, college conferences as well. Fire TV channels let you dive into all the game analysis, highlights, and more, and keep you up to date on all the latest in the world of sports, whether that's March Madness, NBA, MLB, and lots more. Check out Fire TV channels on Fire TV and Alexa devices. If you haven't checked out Fire TV channels, you should. To learn more, go to www.amazon.com/LockedOnFireTV. Today's episode is also brought to you by FanDuel. Say goodbye to busted brackets because FanDuel lets you bet on every game of the tourney. Whether you're betting on a big upset or a one seed, it's time to go dancing on America's #1 sportsbook. And right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets. If your first bet of $5 wins. That's $200 to use on point spreads, money lines. You can even pick who's going to win it all. And also right now, MLB futures. So if you want to bet on the Mets to win the World Series, maybe, hey, you love the Dylan Cease trade for the Padres and you still like their odds to win it all. Maybe you throw a little money on the Padres to win the World Series, or you could take the over on the Mets when it comes to their win total for this season, which is 81.5. Again, all that available at FanDuel. Remember, though, you place that $5 bet first on something that's going on, an NBA game, a tourney game. You win that $200 in bonus bets. Just visit FanDuel.com/locked on and bet on college hoops until they cut down those nets. Can you imagine if the New York Yankees had a 30-year-old starting pitcher who could touch 98 on the radar gun with a couple different variations of his slider, who's striking out batters this spring, who hasn't walked anyone and has only given up one run in his 3 outings so far? Can you imagine if they had somebody that good? Sorry, that's just a little jab at any Yankees fans who stuck around for the second segment. But seriously, Luis Severino has been that good this spring. And it was another great outing on Wednesday night. He pitched 4 innings, allowed just 1 run on a solo homer to Jake Myers. That was one of 2 hits that he allowed in the game. Did not walk any, as I mentioned, has not walked any all spring. And he only threw 47 pitches to get through those 4 innings. Now, I don't know if that was the desired pitch count. That might have wanted to see him ramp it up a little bit further than that. But it also is one of those things where maybe they had it set at, let's just say, 55, 60 pitches or 4 innings. And he just was so economical to get through those 4 innings that he only gets up to 47. 32 of those 47 pitches were strikes. They aren't as, or recently there's been some weird thing going on at Baseball Savant, which I'm sure is probably an issue at Clover Park, trying to get the pitch data. Actually, trying to recall if that game was, I think it was at Clover Park tonight, but regardless, they don't have the full breakdown for Sevy in this start. They do have like the high pitch being 97. I think the average was 97, but it was on a small amount of his pitches that actually got recorded. Regardless, the velocity has been there all spring. He has been confident. He has been attacking the zone, and he looks like Severino of old. Now, he has to stay healthy, which is the hugest aspect of this one. He's got to continue this in the regular season. Obviously, last year, the stuff was there, but he was just living over the heart of the plate way too much. There was all that talk about him tipping pitches. A lot still has to happen in the season before we can say, oh, Luis Severino is a frontline starter again. But if you're looking at the bounce back bets that were made this offseason, we might revisit what happened this winter and say, man, the Mets got an absolute steal with Luis Severino. And having him in this rotation right now without Kodai Senga, it could prove vital and really can. And obviously, it's spring training results, but man, he's looked really, really good. Also tonight, there was great pitching out of the Mets bullpen, which also appears to be a strength of this team heading into the season. Jake Diekman gave up a leadoff triple in the 5th inning, and then he struck out 3 batters to strand that runner at third base. So that's one of those outings in spring where you can't take too much from it, but it shows the potential dominance that this guy could give the Mets, because he really does have amazing stuff. Just a matter of keeping those walks in control. But really nice outing for Diekman. Jorge Lopez, who struggled at points this spring, had a clean 1-2-3 inning with 2 strikeouts. He's going to be on the team. I don't know how much he'll be trusted in leverage from the beginning, but he's going to make this roster. So hopefully he can rediscover at least some semblance of the guy that he was in 2022 when he was an all-star for the Orioles. But nice outing for him. Drew Smith gave up a hit, but also struck out 2 in a scoreless inning. And Shintaro Fujinami struck out 2 in a scoreless inning as well. I still don't know what's going to happen with Fuji here. I still believe that come opening day, he's going to be in the minor leagues. And the only reason why I say that is the Mets have so many arms right now in camp that are throwing the ball well. And if you can keep a Sean Reed Foley or a Johan Ramirez for an extra 2-3 weeks and give Fujinami more time to really get comfortable, to work with your coaches, to be pounding the strike zone, to be showing the velocity. Like tonight, he topped out at 96, if I'm not mistaken, which is good, but this is a guy that can throw 102, 103. So he's not all the way ready yet. Of course, that was his third outing, if I'm not mistaken, this spring. It's going to take time. But Fujinami has more upside than maybe any other reliever outside of Edwin Diaz in this bullpen. I just don't know if you need that upside to be realized in March and April. At the beginning of the season, I don't know if you need Fuji. I think you can, sort of shield him a little bit early, make sure that he is exactly where you want him to be, get a little bit of run out of one of these pitchers that doesn't have the optionality. And then whoever's struggling on that bullpen, they're the casualty of the roster when you bring Fuji up. But we'll see how all that ends up transpiring once they have to make those decisions. A couple weeks left before they have to do so. By the way, 2 weeks from opening day today. So that's always a fun thing to note. Kodai Senga will need another week to rest. The Mets are playing this cautious, as they should. He's now 3 weeks removed from that PRP shot, which was the original timetable. Hey, you rest for 3 weeks, maybe you can start throwing. They're not saying this is a setback. It's simply just making sure that he's as strong as possible before they try to ramp him up. And so let's just say next week he gets the green light. Well, now you have a week left of spring. Obviously, we knew that Senga was not going to be available for opening day. From that point on, if you count out 6 weeks, 6 to 8 weeks even, that'd be the 28th. 4th, 11th, 18th. I mean, yeah, I still think May is a possibility here. Early to mid-May is my guess on when we see Kodai Senga, but hopefully once he gets back to throwing, there are no setbacks, and the Mets will eventually get their ace back for a large portion of this season. But their ace, quote unquote, on opening day is going to be Jose Quintana. The Mets announced he will be their opening day starter. That's what I've been saying on this show for a while now, that I thought Quintana would get the nod, and he deserves it. He is the one returning member from last year's rotation, along with Tyler McGill, but the guy that was projected to be in the opening day rotation last year, and the guy that finished the season really strong. He's got all the seniority here when it comes to him or McGill as far as being the returning pitchers. If not for the Senga injury, who knows if McGill would even be in the rotation at all. So I think McGill will be happy to take the ball whenever they give it to him at the beginning of the season. For Quintana, it's a real honor. He spoke about how excited he is to get that opportunity. A guy that has put together some really good seasons in his career and is going to be counted on early to just be that veteran in the staff. There obviously is some pitchers that have experience with, Luis Severino and Sean Manaea and even Adrian Hazard to a certain extent. But Quintana's the guy that's been around the block the longest. So I love the decision by the Mets. It was cool to hear Quintana sort of glow about the opportunity to see Carlos Mendoza express that excitement of being able to share that news with Quintana. And I'm excited to watch him pitch again 2 weeks from today. Also, though, on Wednesday, we saw some interesting performances from the hitters that the Mets had in their lineup. They finally scored some runs, 6 runs on the day. I want to talk about some of the individuals that stood out, as well as an update on Jeff McNeil coming back from injury. So we'll get to all that in just a minute. First, though, today's episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. Testing your skills on Prize Picks this season is the most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. If you have the skills, you can turn $10 into $1,000 with just a few taps, because it's daily fantasy sports made easy, where you pick more or less than on 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings roll in. So once the season starts, you can pick more on Francisco Lindor's hits and Jose Quintana's strikeouts on opening day. Pair that with, if it's the other side, what's going to be the Brewers, who's their opening day starter? Freddie Peralta. So maybe you pick the under on his strikeouts. You pair all those, you try to win big. You can also look at MLB season stats right now under the MLB season tab. That's MLB SZN, where you can pick more or less on some full season stats like Pete Alonso's RBIs, which are listed at 108.5. Download the app today and use the code LOCKEDONMLB for a first deposit match up to $100. Again, download the Prize Picks app, use the code all in lowercase LOCKEDONMLB for a first deposit match up to $100. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy. Head over to Prize Picks today. Mets put up some runs finally in a spring training game. We're not going to break down exactly how they scored because it is the spring training, but a couple of hitters to note in this one. When it comes to the DH competition, DJ Stewart had himself a solid day at the office, 1 for 2 with a pair of walks. G-Man Choi went 0 for 3, but did have a bases loaded walk. Brett Baty did not play. He's day-to-day with a back injury. He was a late scratch. They then had to move Vientos over to third base, G-Man Choi to first to accommodate everything. And Vientos had himself a really good game. I think he did play the entire game. I stopped following along in the 8th inning there, so I don't know if he did play the field in the 9th, but he did get in a bat in the 8th inning, and he did a lot with it. Hit his 3rd home run of the spring, also drew a walk in the game. That brought his OPS up to 750, which is pretty solid so far. And in that at bat, it was just a really professional, solid at bat. I mean, putting it all together pitch by pitch. He falls behind 1-2 in the count, battled back to 3-2, fouled off some tough sweepers, and then in a hitter's count, or in a payoff pitch, I should say, of a full count, he gets a sweeper that got too much plate, and he put it in the seats. And, he said after the game that he's really locked in. His timing's getting there. He thinks he can miss hit balls and drive out of the ballpark, which is something that we've been talking about on this show for years. I remember having Aram Leighton on in 2021, where Vientos was having his first sort of breakout in the minor leagues, and he discussed that very thing, how Vientos would miss hit a ball and it would find its way into the seats. Just really does have amazing power if he can tap into it. If he starts to get that feel, starts to put himself in good positions with these at-bats and stacks them up, yeah, he can be a dangerous hitter. And one of the quotes that he said after the game that I think really gets you rooting for Mark Vientos is he said, "I feel like I walk around here with a chip on my shoulder. I feel like I've always got to prove ×2, and I feel like I've been doing it. So I just want to keep it up and keep proving myself, and it's not going to stop." I love seeing that. And this, of course, is coming off the heels of a podcast yesterday where I was talking a lot about JD Martinez. And maybe I should stop saying I'm going to, refrain from mentioning Martinez on this show, because here I am discussing that conversation again, but it's under a different context through the lens of my opinion on Mark Vientos. I don't want it to be misconstrued that I don't believe in Vientos, because anyone who's been listening to this show for years now knows that I've had as much stock in Vientos as anyone speaking into a microphone about the Mets. I have been all in on this guy for a really long time. Here's my whole thing on the JD Martinez situation. I'm more interested in Martinez coming in and taking at bats away from DJ Stewart and G-Man Choi and Trace Thompson, those players at the end of the bench, pushing Mark Vientos into that first bench spot where he would platoon with Brett Baty and even push Brett Baty. Brett Baty hasn't looked that great in spring so far. Maybe he could be your starting third baseman, and JD Martinez is your DH. That is why I have been discussing Martinez so much, because he would move the needle for this Mets lineup. It is not a knock on Mark Vientos to say, I think that JD Martinez would produce more offensively this season. It's not. The guy's been an all-star countless times and is a really productive hitter. But that also does not mean that I believe that Mark Vientos can't do it. I've said on this show many times, I think in a full season, he can hit 30 home runs. Hit 6 home runs last September. I think he can do that, 4 months out of the year, and then in a couple of the down months, still pop a couple home runs and get up to 30. So I really like Vientos. It's a good game for him, and hopefully he can continue to build off that and find himself in a position to not only make the opening day roster, I think that's going to happen no matter what, but be the everyday DH and get as much run as possible. Now, one last note from the game on Wednesday, Joey Wendell, 2 for 2. He's hitting 375 this spring. That is only going 3 for 8, though. It's small sample size. So when you go 2 for 2 and you only had 6 at-bats prior, of course, your average is going to balloon. But solid game for him. Luckily, though, he's not appearing to be the opening day starting second baseman, because Jeff McNeil is on track for opening day, according to Mike Puma. He was taking BP today. Not like he was taking live BP and squaring up against 95-mile-per-hour fastballs, but it's good to see him taking swings that are not just off a tee. And he's the type of hitter that I really believe can ramp up quickly once he gets that, full go ahead to take some live BP, to get into some minor league games. He'll be on the backfield a lot over the final, week and a half of spring whenever he gets that clearance, and he'll be good to go, it seems like, for opening day, which is obviously a promising sign for the Mets. Anyway, that's going to be all for today's show. Assuming there's not any other breaking news around the league that I got to discuss, or something that happens with the Mets, we're going to get to the show I promised last Friday for a Friday Farm Report. I'm going to give you my big predictions for the Mets' top prospects this season. Then next week, we'll be doing the bold predictions for the MLB roster. So excited to do some predicting for you all. If you want to check out that episode, make sure you're listening on the audio side. You follow, rate, and review wherever you get your podcast. If you're watching on YouTube, hit that subscribe button. Trying to get up to 10,000 subs now is our next big goal. So I appreciate all of you. Hit that subscribe button. You can follow me on X at Finkelstein Ryan. Follow the show at Locked On Mets. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listen and your first watch every day. Now, for your second watch, head over to the first ever 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube that covers everything in the world of sports. Of course, I'm talking about Locked On Sports Today with our local hosts from each team, as well as your league-wide experts for each league. You can find Locked On Sports Today streaming 24/7 on YouTube.